Shalom, 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 friends. Shabbat shalom, Shavvato. How you guys are doing today? Um, it is very, very happy to see you back again. Uh, we do have our rabbi today. Last week we couldn't able to catch him whole, but today we do have a rabbi. And let's not wait for any moment today. Let's, without further any ado, let's invite Rabbi to the panel and let's go. Yes, Rabbi. How are you? Finally, to get you on this panel. Oh my goodness. Oh, it took all my life to. I don't know why it is like this today. I'm telling you, today is, I think, the worst day ever. I would say. Oh my goodness. How are you? You're so enthusiastic into all the time. That's good. I don't know
You
why
s-
yeah. um, why my really the I don't know, the network is slow, or I'm not sure why it is like that you know it's really kind of a little bit slow today, but well, anyway,
as long
welcome
as
back.
the audio, as long as the
Yeah,
audio.
audio is good, everything is good. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Congratulations on your haircut. The most important thing is I see the nice haircut. Beautiful haircut.
Oh, thank you
يتحدث
so.
عن
Yeah, I thought that you had a haircut last week. I said, let me go and have the haircut. But actually, it was due like a week. So I thought I must have a haircut now. So I let me go. So I did my haircut. So that's good. Thank you so much. And yeah, welcome back, Rabbi, again. I'm inviting you back again because I missed you a lot, and I had to do my show, the whole show myself, and we missed. And actually, I was expecting one more person today to join with us to the group. That's my brother from India, and he wanted to ask some couple of questions to you. Last week itself, he posted the questions on the site, and then I told him, "Why don't you join with us? You can join." And he's from Muscat, Oman, and
Oh, awesome. That's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah. So I thought that probably he would join. I sent him the link. I don't know, maybe early morning he's sleeping, or not, I'm not sure, but I told him that I'll be sending him a list. I mean, link. So he did have some question before we start our. I'm going to change our topic from now on. Our topic will be a new heading today. Okay, before going to the heading today, let us do uh, our our parade, the usual parade. What we do. Where is that parade? Where is that parade?
Buddy.
Uh, yeah, where is it? Okay, ready?
Yalla.
Yalla. There you go. Where is yours?
What do you mean, my parade? Oh,
Say high five. Why I'm going left?
because it's all opposite.
Yeah, but last time also I did this. Last time I did right, it went left. Well, anyway, so
Yeah,
fantastic.
let's do
So
it. One, two, three.
three. There you go.
Yay.
so so this time I'm changing my heading today. This is our heading going to be. You see that?
I see it.
There we go. So based on that, we're going to ask a few questions. I don't want to take your time a lot, but before that, I'm going to ask you a question. And then what my brother asked you. It's very, very easy question. Today is going to be the easiest to show you ever. No tough questions. Very, very easy. You're going to walk like just on the cake. It's a cake walk
I can
for you.
take the simplest question and make it the most complicated. So let's do it.
You can do the complicated answers. That's fantastic. This is very simple question. His name is Samson Sundar. You can call him Samson and address the answer to Samson. Okay. And his question was, where is that? Okay. Uh, oh my goodness. One of his questions was, why Jewish people killed a villager from Nazareth.
Killed a what from Nazareth?
A villager, like
Oh, a villager.
a villager, like
Okay, Samson, this is a famous question. I do like if our friend uh, Mr. Ramesh read your question correctly. I do like that you did not ask why did the Jews kill a villager from Nazareth, because there's a difference between asking why did the Jews kill a villager from Nazareth as opposed to asking why did the Jews. Saying Jews non-specific as opposed to saying the Jews has a different connotation. Usually people who hate Jewish people will say the Jews killed someone from Nazareth. As if the Jews as a whole, the Jews, like all the Jewish people, are guilty. So it's good that he did not say the Jews, because it's unjust to hold an entire population accountable for something that some individuals did at any point. You know, whether it's Indians, some, let's say some Indian guy from India visiting the U.S. killed a white man, an innocent white man. Would it be just? Would it be honest? Would it be fair to then hate all Indians and say the Indians killed some villager from the United States just because some random Indian did some mean thing? No, of course that wouldn't be fair. And if some white American, is visiting in India and he happens to kill an innocent Indian guy, would it be fair to say the Americans killed the Indian villager in India? Of course not. In the same way, it's not fair if one Jew, even if it's 20 Jews, killed an innocent man from Nazareth. It would not be fair to say all the Jews are responsible. This is primitive thinking. This is the thinking of backward societies. And it's certainly not the thinking that that villager from Nazareth would want people to think. That villager from Nazareth, who, as far as we know, said in his last dying breath, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Father, forgive them, because the people doing this to me don't know what they're doing." So, if you, Samson, and anyone who has a similar question, if you actually respect that villager from Nazareth, if you really esteem him as a person, if you think he's a prophet of God, if he wanted God to forgive those who did injustice toward him and he asked for their forgiveness, do you not think he would want you also to forgive them? Assuming it's even the responsibility of an entire people who did not actually do the act. Assuming that's even the case, which is not. If he forgave the people who treated him unjustly, you should too, if you claim to be a follower of that villager from Nazareth. And if you think he had authority to forgive, are you denying his authority to forgive? Are you saying some people who did injustice to him, who killed him, he asked for them to be forgiven? You don't think they're going to be forgiven? Do you not really believe in that villager from Nazareth? Who are you, Samson? Maybe you're an honest person. If you're an honest person, think logically, think honestly. Don't point the finger. This villager from Nazareth said, "No man takes my life from me, but I lay down my life willingly." And if you believe in the traditional Christian understanding of the words of this villager from Nazareth, if he had not willingly given up his life, allowing a few isolated individuals to take his life, then you, Samson, would have no forgiveness of sin, according to Christian theology. You should be grateful for those people who he willingly allowed to kill him if you think your forgiveness of sin, your salvation, your eternal life is dependent on his death. What would happen if they hadn't killed him? Would you then have no eternal life? Think about it. Try to be consistent in your beliefs, consistent in your reasoning, and most importantly, be consistent with his teachings. He said, forgive, you should probably forgive. He didn't hold the entire Jewish people guilty. You probably shouldn't either. And also, one last thing on this topic. If one was just to say, because I've heard some Jew hating people say this before, when Jesus said, Father, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing, he was talking about the Roman soldiers. What Roman soldiers? The Roman soldiers who were killing him. So you have to decide, okay, if you want to point the finger to Jews and say Jews killed Jesus, all right, but then when Jesus says, Father, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing, and you don't want Jews to be forgiven, so you're saying, oh, but he's not talking about the Jews. Well, now you have to admit that it wasn't actually the Jews who killed him according to the Gospels. So make up your mind. Make up your mind. It reminds me of Jew-hating terrorists who say Jews should not live in the Holy Land because Jews are from Europe. They'll say this out of one side of their mouth, and they'll say Jews are a bunch of white people from Europe who took over the land of Israel and are kicking out the native non-Jewish Arab Palestinians. On the other side of their mouth, they will then justify their hatred of Jews by saying, you killed the prophets. Which prophets? The prophets who were in the land of Israel thousands of years ago. Well, you can't say both of these things out of the same mouth unless you're a liar, unless you're dishonest. You can't, in one breath, hate the Jewish people for killing the prophets of ancient Israel, and then out of the other side of your mouth say, I'm going to hate you for killing the prophets of Israel, but you're not really the Jews because you're not from the land of Israel. You're from Europe. Make up your mind. One or the other. It can't be both. Truth, the hallmark of truth is consistency. It's logical. Lies, the hallmark of lies, the sign of a lie is inconsistency. It contradicts itself. And here, my friend, there are many contradictions. And the way is the way of truth, and that is the way of life. All right. If you're not following the path of truth, which is consistent, you're not following that path of life. And no man can come to the Father except for through the truth. So please seek the truth, and you will find life. You will also find it in the book of Proverbs, by the way. It says there, I, wisdom, speak, and he who finds me will find life and the favor of the Lord. Be'ezrat Hashem.
Fantastic. Fantastic,
Yallah.
fantastic, Rabbi. I like that answer what you gave just now. It is really absolutely fantastic because, forgiving, as they say, Jesus, that even if someone did something according to their logic, that he is supposed to be forgiving, not blaming again and again on something.
Yeah.
On,
If you
you know,
believe that there's power in his death, if you believe he has power to forgive, then you should probably believe him when he asked for those who killed him that they should be forgiven. Do you think the intercession of Jesus is insufficient? Do you think it's not powerful? Well, then are you really a Christian, or are you really one who believes in that villager from Nazareth? One or the other. Or is it just an excuse to hate the Jewish people, a hatred that is not rational, that exists already, and you're just using this as an excuse?
yeah,
Because this excuse doesn't work.
that's
That
correct.
villager from Nazareth was Jewish.
That's correct. Absolutely fantastic, phenomenal, Rabbi. I like that answer. And one more thing, the other day I was watching a video. There was a huge sermon in France. The guy was giving, and he was quoting these things. I think I did send you the question already. You understood the part of the question, but the part of question wasn't clear. So I wanted to bring that
Correct.
point that we can clear that one. So number one is what he's selling in his message was Moses was grown up in Egypt. He wasn't grown up in the Hebrew language or anything. So he was grown up with the Egyptian language and Egyptian culture. So now he chased out to Midian, and then he was growing in the Midian. I mean, he was there in the Midian with his father-in-law for 40 years. So he learned the Midianic language. So he is telling that the language what God was talking to him was the Median language, not the Hebrew
Mhm.
language. It was not
Okay.
given to him. So this was the question is what language God spoke with. To me, I don't care what language God spoke to him. He gave the Torah to Moses. That's very important to me than what language he spoke with Moses at that point.
Absolutely.
You know.
Absolutely.
So go ahead and then yeah, the question what he was raising was what language God spoke with Moses at Mount Sinai, and as Moses knew Hebrew at the time, basically he was an Egyptian at the time, and then also when God was explaining to Moses when he asked, his name, the God's name, and God was telling to him like higher, is that right? The word higher, and then Jewish people don't use the word higher anymore; they use ani, just because God
I
used
have
the
no
word
idea what you're. I think I kind of understand what you're trying to say. Is this what this guy said? I don't really
yes.
understand what he's talking about. It sounds
The,
like he's confusing something.
no,
I
this
think
is yeah.
he's.
He is
Go ahead.
confusing totally. So okay, what what
I don't
God
even
told?
understand the question. I don't completely understand what he's.
He didn't
There's
want.
nothing like it. I think what he's saying is that the four-letter name of God, which we do not traditionally pronounce, not in just any old circumstance, and that's a whole topic in and of itself. But that name that we don't traditionally pronounce is not the name Haya or Ahya. That name is Yudhe Wohe. That's the spelling of it. YHWH. So it's a different name. I think he's referring to that name, but maybe he's not. I'm not completely sure.
No, no,
And we don't
you
replace that name. We don't replace that name with Ani. Ani means I. I don't. We don't
yeah. So
replace it with.
he's trying to throw some stories there and making the crowd to believe, and then he's comparing that word to Jesus was telling, "I am the gate, higher the gate, I
That
am
doesn't
the."
make sense. Haya means he was. That doesn't make sense. Haya is past tense, third person masculine singular. That
Yeah.
means he, some other person, not myself, not someone I'm talking to, but someone else I am not speaking to. He was. That's what Haya means. He
Yeah.
was. Jesus did
So
not
now,
say that.
no. So he was trying to compare that I am the gate, I am the way, I am the truth. Everything Jesus was telling them, but the whole language was written in Greek, not even in Hebrew.
Mhm.
The New Testament was
Correct.
written,
Correct.
you know.
It
So
is. There is some scholarly basis to suspect that there may have originally been some Hebrew copies of some of the early Christian writings, because several early we're talking about very early Catholic
yeah,
authorities such as Eusebius, Ignatius, make references to such things. But we also have to remember that it wasn't that the original Jewish followers of Jesus naturally died out and in a natural process got replaced by non-Jewish followers of Jesus. It did not happen naturally. There were, and it's recorded in early Catholic literature. And I'm not
yeah,
saying that the modern Catholics today are responsible for those atrocities, but those atrocities did happen in the early Catholic Church. This was before the split between the Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church. In the
yeah,
early church, there was a conscious effort to destroy the Jewish Christian community. And it's very likely that they destroyed the Jewish Hebrew texts of the original followers of Jesus. Very likely,
Jesus.
especially when you look at all the editing that occurred with the Greek New Testament. It's unbelievable. Like there's definitely suspicious tampering with the text.
That's correct. So, well, whoever watching this video or whoever observing this one definitely would know that the guy who was talking all those things was really not correct, and he was attacking the
I
crowd with
suspect
all this.
he's I suspect he's referring to places where Jesus said I am, and Christians often will try to say here this is Jesus admitting or saying that he is God. Okay,
Yes,
because
that's what he's telling.
they look at English translations where in the Christian English translations God says to Moses I am that I am, which itself is not exactly inaccurate. translation. But when God says "I am that I am," He's not actually saying He's not saying "ani" in Hebrew. He's saying "ahya, ahya asher ahya," and
Hmm.
"ahya" is a progressive verb. It's the imperfect verb, which means it continues on. It's not the word "ani." "Ani" means I. "Ahya" means I in a verb form continue to be. So I continue to be what I continue to be now and continually. It's a different
Yeah.
word. And the Greek word that Jesus uses in the Greek New Testament is not an equivalent of that. And if you look at the term that Jesus is saying in the Greek, which gets translated as I am in those places, it does not get translated as I am in many other places that the same exact term appears when it's not Jesus saying it. They conveniently translate it as I am because this is like a catchphrase. It's a hot
Yes.
topic word to
Yes.
connect it artificially to what God said to Moses. If they would be consistent, it would be they could translate it as I am he, but then it doesn't stand out as much. And if they translated it as I am when non-Jesus people say it, then suddenly it's going to look like, oh, these people who are not Jesus are God. So it's an artificial proof, which is no proof at all. It's really deceptive.
Yeah.
It's not deceptive on the part of regular Christians. It's deceptive on the part of the translators.
Yeah. You
And
know,
that's why Christians need
even in other words, telling that because New Testament was written way too later than your Old Testament or
oh
the
yeah, of
Torah.
course.
So it's easy to write the way we want to write. It's not comparative right at the same time to say, look at this. This one he
It's
already
influence.
telling.
We know that it's influenced. Right, right.
Yeah, the book was influenced by the Torah, so they can write the same way, whatever they want.
That,
So
it admits this. It's ridiculous to even question that.
of course, that's what I'm telling. So it is already said
It's
that it's a
absurd.
proof. It's a proof that this has been influenced from there.
Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5, verse 17, do not think I came to abolish, to nullify, to cancel the Torah and the prophets.
Yeah,
I have not come to abolish. And
came to
people then
fulfill.
point to the next verse: heaven and earth will not pass, to lest heaven and earth pass, unless heaven and earth pass away, not the single jot or tittle of the Torah will pass away. But they often ignore the next verse. And whoever teaches and does the least of these commandments, what commandments in the context? He's talking about, he just referred to the instruction of God, the Torah. That's God's instructions, God's commands. Whoever does and teaches even the least of these commandments will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever nullifies even the least of these commandments of the Torah that he just is telling you he didn't cancel, he will be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. This is in the New Testament. The
Yes.
New Testament explicitly depends on the authority of the Torah. If you claim the Torah is unreliable or that it's canceled, then you've automatically also canceled the Gospels.
Yeah.
They just don't think it through.
Jesus himself refers several times to go and look into the books of Moses.
Endlessly,
Yeah, he tells
endlessly.
several times. Yeah, in the books. Well, that's fantastic. We cover those two questions. That's fantastic. Now let's go on our new topic on the title. On we said that Moshiach. Tell us a
Mashiach,
different.
Mashiach,
Me-
Mashiach. Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
Moshiach, please explain us the Moshiach, Messiah, Mashiach, the terms.
So you just want to know the term.
Now, as a starting, so for the new
Okay.
topic.
Okay, so the word Messiah comes from the attempt to represent the sounds of the Hebrew word Mashiach in Greek letters in the Greek New Testament. There is no sh letter, sh sound, in the Greek alphabet. They don't have the concept of a concept of s and h together makes sh sound. So the closest they could get in Greek letters is s. So every sh in Hebrew words turn to simple s sounds. So that's how Yeshua becomes Yisu in Greek. And then you add the s at the end to make it indicate that it's a masculine word. And with Mashiach, there's no ha sound. There's no cha. There's something similar to a cha, but the het is not a cha. It's ha. So it just gets dropped. It got dropped in Greek. So from Mashiach, you get Messiah. Messiah. And
Yeah.
actually, they add an S. So if you look at older English translations, it doesn't say Messiah, it says Messias, Messias from the Greek. Same way it says Jesus and Zacharias, etc.
Yeah.
But the
So
Hebrew word is Mashiach, and it means anointed with oil. Anointed just means oil has been applied to someone. And it was a way of symbolically indicating that someone or something has a special status, is consecrated for some holy purpose. That's all that it means. In fact, Christ is not a translation of Hebrew or of Greek. What the Greek term Messiah is to the Hebrew word Mashiach, that's what Christ is to the Greek word Christos. It's not a translation. It's an attempt to represent the sounds in another language, which is really sad. It would have been better that they either tried to go back to Mashiach in the English translations, or they translate it as anointed. But instead, they create these false uniquenesses. There's all kinds of like theological bias in the translations that Christians frequently use. The translations try to strengthen or create proofs for certain assumptions in Christianity, which have no proof in the text itself. If the Christian translations would be consistent in translating the word in the original languages as Christ, then you would see Aaron being referred to as Christ. You'd see the sons of Aaron, the brother of Moses, being referred to as Christs. You'd see Cyrus, the king of Persia, in the book of Isaiah, being referred to, well, God referring to him as my Christ. But they don't do that
Saul,
because that
King Saul, Samuel, or David,
it all they
all
don't
become.
translate it this way, even though in the original languages there's zero difference, the same exact term. If you open up the pre-Christian Greek Septuagint, that is the ancient Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, it's the Greek Old Testament. Every place where it says Mashiach in the Hebrew of the Torah, of the Law of Moses, you can find it in the Greek Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament. And what does it say there? It says Christos. Same exact Greek word that's used for Jesus. But they conveniently translate it as anointed in the Christian English translations, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Any studious Christian knows that Christ or Messiah means anointed, but they don't think about the fact that it's literally the same exact word when they're just reading through the text. If they would, then they would understand that the term Christ does not mean God. It's not equivalent with God. But in everyday Christian lingo, the term Christ is basically synonymous with God. If we would be consistent in the translations, that idea of them being synonymous would not work, because then you'd be reading Aaron the Christ. And you would not think here that Christ means God. You wouldn't think that Cyrus, king of Persia, is God. You know,
Yeah. Yeah, they misunderstood a lot of things, and one of the idea is also Messiah. Messiah mean they are simply translated into a savior, or something. They're not
right.
bringing. Yeah, they don't come to that point. So well, I
Another
just wanted to. Yeah, go ahead.
go ahead. Well, another thing I've often seen for proofs that Jesus is God is like there might be a verse where uh, Jesus says um, that like God will save you, and then Jesus will say that I will save you. Oh, it's obvious. If Jesus said that God will save you, I'm just giving an example. It could be some other thing, but there are a few examples like this in the New Testament where Jesus says God will save you, and then Jesus is referring to himself saving the people. So, oh, it's obvious. This means that Jesus is basically saying in a roundabout way, in a non direct way, Jesus is saying, I am God. If you take that same logic and you're consistent with it, and remember, truth is consistent, it's internally consistent and externally consistent. If you are consistent with that reasoning, then you can open up the Hebrew Bible and find proofs, the same exact proofs that Moses is God. Because God says, or Moses says, God will take you out of Egypt. And then Moses will say, I took you out of Egypt. Oh, you see? If the one that took Israel out of Egypt is God, and Moses says that I took you out of Egypt, obviously Moses is God. So
Well, yeah. On those days,
they're not consistent.
Greek kings were all the time. They were gods.
Mm-hmm. The term
And
the term God does not even exist in Hebrew the way it exists in English.
yeah,
There's
yeah,
not an equivalent.
yeah. Fantastic, Rubai. I really like that answer too. And okay, I just wanted to put that word because I know these are all the very basics that I want them to know at least what they're supposed to learn. So that's why I asked the question. So the other very common, the question this question has been asked several years. I know that one, 1,000 more times. So why? So um, I know why Jewish people didn't accept Jesus as Messiah. In other words, the standards or the protocols or the categories of Messiah. That's what
Let's get something
Jesus.
straight. Let's get something
Yeah,
straight.
yeah,
Number one, the majority of the Jewish people at the time that Jesus was on earth alive did not live in the land of Israel. They did not have mass communications. They didn't have internet. The majority of the Jewish people did not reject Jesus as anything. They didn't reject him as Messiah. They also didn't accept. But not accepting something is not the same as not accepting something is not the same as rejecting. They didn't know about him. They didn't even know he existed. The majority of Jews during Jesus' lifetime never heard of him. There's no indication that they heard of him. And probably the majority of Jews in the land of Israel never heard of him. It seems very likely, especially if you believe in the authenticity of the Gospels, and I'm not going to try to challenge it for people who believe in it already. Uh, it seems clearly that he would have been known among some of the elites, among the priests serving in Jerusalem in the temple, and among some of the elites of the Sadducees and Pharisees. But these are not the regular Jewish people. That's like equating all people of a certain country with the political elites of that country. And that's not fair. You know, political elites are very often corrupt in every country, with every race and every ethnicity. It's an unfortunate reality, but there's often corruption. However, we see in the New Testament, even in the New Testament, that of those Jews who did know Jesus, they also did not all reject him. Almost all of his followers were Jewish. They were Jewish. They didn't magically stop being Jewish when they were following him. So, yes, there were plenty of Jews who either weren't sure what he was or thought that he might be the Messiah, but they weren't convinced, or they thought that uh, he's just crazy or he's got a big ego. Some of them may have thought he's not even claiming to be the Messiah because he was put on the spot many times and he never gave an explicit answer. Maybe Jesus himself, if we're just looking at the things that he said, maybe one of the reasons this is possible. If you are honest, you will admit this is possible. I'm not saying it's the reality, but it's a possibility. Maybe one of the reasons Jesus said, always answered in such a vague way, never giving a clear answer when he would be asked if he's the Messiah. It could possibly be because he wasn't sure. Maybe he thought that he potentially could be, or he would be, but that he wasn't yet, or had not yet done anything to make him officially the Messiah. So he didn't want to say yes or no. And this is plausible because within Torah, within Judaism, within proper traditional Judaism, a person can have the potential to be the Messiah without actually fulfilling the role of Messiah. And it doesn't mean the person's evil necessarily. It's just things didn't work out that way. But in Christianity, they have the assumption that it's like God absolutely appointed that it's absolutely going to be this person, and not considering that, God definitely is ultimately the one in control of the world, but God works together with the will of man and orchestrates things in some way beyond our comprehension. But it still depends on the will of man. And Jesus, if you are a traditional Christian, you believe he was a man. Even if you think he was God and man, he was still a man. If you don't think he was a man, then I don't know what kind of Christian you are, but you're not a traditional Christian. There is a term, but that's a different. In ancient Christianity, there were disputes, theological disputes. Was Jesus even a man? But yeah, I think that. Okay, back to the question: why didn't they accept him? Number one, most Jews didn't know about him. Number two, many Jews did believe he was the Messiah or likely to become the Messiah. Number three, those who did not think he was the Messiah I suspect they didn't think he was the Messiah for reasons that are different for the reasons that most Jews have today. I think that many of the leaders didn't think he was the Messiah. One, because there was more than one opinion about what the Messiah would or wouldn't do during that time period. Judaism was more diverse in its eschatological beliefs than it is nowadays. And number two, nowadays, establishment Christian dogma and beliefs are attached to the concept of Jesus. They're like one and the same because the Jewish people we haven't preserved the texts of the students of Jesus. If maybe we would had the early Christian church not killed off the Jewish believers of Jesus, but they did kill them off, and there are written records about this. So since we don't have records, the Jewish people don't have substantial records about Jesus, other than sayings about Jesus from hundreds of years later, likely in reaction to the Christian presentation of Jesus. So all we know is the Christian presentation of Jesus, which is incompatible with the Jewish faith. It's incompatible with the Word of God. The establishment perception of Jesus, and I'm not saying that it's one and the same as the historical Jesus. Most scholars do not think that they are the same. My inclination is that they are not the same. But the establishment Christian belief of Jesus is all sorts of things that Jesus never said about himself. Jesus never, at least not in any explicit way, taught the Trinity. He never taught the sign of the cross. He never taught a Baptist church service. Jesus was familiar with synagogue service. He went to synagogues. Despite his disagreements with the Jewish leadership,
He
he still went
observes
to
the path.
synagogue. Yeah. And he
Yeah.
said, when they asked him about it, he said, whatever the scribes and the Pharisees tell you to do, that you should do and observe. He said this to his disciples in Matthew chapter 23 before going to rebuke the religious leaders for their hypocrisy. Just in case you might think, since I, Jesus, am rebuking them, pointing out their hypocrisy, just in case you think that means you shouldn't take their authority seriously as members of the great Sanhedrin, well, I'm going to preface my rebuke of these leaders' hypocrisy by saying to my students, the scribes and the Pharisees sit in the position of Moses. Therefore, for this reason, whatever they tell you, that you should do and observe. Disregarding the authority of the sages of Israel is contrary to the teachings of Jesus. But this is not the Jesus that has been presented to the Jewish people for thousands of years. The Jesus Jews have been presented with for the last 2,000 years is a Jesus who wants you to eat things that God commanded the people of Israel not to eat, wants you to break the Sabbath that God commanded Israel to keep for all their generations. If Jesus actually taught any of these things, he would for sure be a false prophet. So you have to ask yourself, did Jesus actually teach these things, or are these corruptions? And that's up for you to decide. I'm not going to tell you. You have to
Yeah.
believe one way or the other.
So I like your observation on this story because you did say that some of the Jews accepted Jesus. Yes, there were some Jewish people,
The
they went behind him,
majority,
right?
the
Like
majority of his students were Jewish.
Jewish people, they accept. At the same time, you also you know kind of triggering a question in that one. In my question is that before I ask my question, I'm giving one more statement. Jesus was also partially, portraying that he was a Messiah. He was teaching. He was a teacher. Basically, the Messiah is expected to teach the Torah, and he was doing that on those days. But
Many
he was
people were
not.
teaching.
Yeah, Rabbi is teaching Torah, but that one of the job that he was performing. Not all of the jobs. One of the job that he's performing that time, and some of the jobs he was doing extra and using God's power, and some of the jobs he was not even addressing some of the jobs. So that's why. And now you're putting a question in me. You said that there was not many Jewish people living in that area at the time, because
Correct.
only people, those who were so accumulated to the Roman kingdom or Greek kingdom, they were very close network people living in those areas, especially like the Pharisees or Sadducees, those who lived on those days. But what do you think that if all the Jews would have been there, Do you think that everyone would have accepted Jesus as a Messiah?
I have no way of knowing for sure, but I don't think so, because the Jewish people are not homogenous. We are homogenous on certain basic fundamentals of our ethno-religious identity. We are homogenous mostly on certain basic principles, more so back then than even today. But there are many areas of uh, Jewish expectations of or interpretations of prophecy that are by no means homogenous, where there's a lot of different interpretation. Even today, among the Orthodox traditional Jewish establishment, there's wide recognition that there are many different opinions about all sorts of different verses in the Bible. You open up any traditional Jewish Bible called Mikraot Gedolot, the great scriptures, and you will find like one or two verses in the middle of each page, and then it's surrounded by a ton of different ancient commentaries, and they don't all agree with each other on every point, but they do agree with each other on certain fundamental points, like the incorporeality of God, the immutability of God, that God does not change, that God is not subject to anything but himself, which means God is not subject to time. God is not subject to physicality. He created physicality. He's not subject to space. He created space. Um, and and that means that space is not something that is tied to the reality of his being. It's not something that his being is a part of. His, it's not that God exists literally outside of time or literally inside of time. It's that the concept does not apply to him at all. He is the determiner of time according to the expression of his will. All right. Um, but these sorts of things are fundamentals that were widely held by the Jewish people and still traditionally are. But questions about the Messiah, like that, if you think the Messiah will come um, once, or if you think he will come twice, that does not have any impact on how you keep God's commandments. There's no commandment of God's commandments in the Torah that says you have to believe that the Messiah will come only one time, or you have to believe the Messiah will come twice or 100 times. And if you don't believe exactly the right thing, then you're going to go to hell. That's not in the Torah. And to assert, to be adamant that you have to believe only this way, and if you don't, you're breaking the Torah. That, my friend, is breaking the Torah, because that doesn't appear in the Torah. And the Torah says, do not add to or take away from these commandments. The moment you say that you that anyone has to do more than what God commanded the people of Israel in the covenant of Torah, the moment you say they have to do more or less of any of it, at that moment you have violated the word of God. You have called God a liar. You may not are intentionally saying it, but the implications of your words is that you are saying God is a liar. The God of the Torah is a liar, because that God said that this covenant that he made with Israel is an everlasting covenant. It says this explicitly, an everlasting covenant. For all your generations in all your dwelling places. Some people say, oh, but this word olam doesn't necessarily mean everlasting. God said that this covenant was everlasting in every single way you could possibly describe everlasting in Hebrew. He used basically every term possible. You have to have like the most severe form of cognitive dissonance, intellectual dishonesty, to think that the Torah was not commanded as an everlasting covenant for Israel. I encourage you guys, any listeners who are unsure about this, start studying the Torah at least as much as you study every other book of the New Testament. Before you start viewing yourself as an expert on the Torah, start studying it, even in a translation if that's all you have. But keep in mind that it wasn't originally written in English or Hindi or any other language of India or Europe, or it was written in Hebrew. So you need to learn Hebrew. You need to start somewhere before you view yourself or your preacher, who likely also doesn't know much more than the alphabet, before you start viewing yourselves as experts. You're not. I've been interacting with pastors and missionaries, evangelists online and in person in Israel for more than 20 years. And I've met maybe two or three that were at a level of conversational fluency. And I'm sure that there's a lot more than 2 or 3 in the world of pastors who are fluent in Hebrew.
Oh yeah.
But I saw so many, and I've only encountered 2 or 3 in that span of time. There's not a lot. If
Yeah.
you know the alphabet or a handful of Hebrew words and you know how to use a lexicon or look up a word in a concordance, that doesn't mean you know Hebrew. Yeah, you know more than absolute ignoramus, but you still don't know Hebrew. I'm sorry. Like
Oh.
no one who knows how to look up a word in Spanish can honestly go around saying, "I know Spanish." Like, who are you kidding? Only yourself. You other
Yes.
fools.
Yeah.
Learn Hebrew. Like, and until you know Hebrew, yeah, you might learn from a rabbi who does know Hebrew much better, and that rabbi might be wrong. But the chances that he's wrong are much less than the chances that you're wrong. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Learn the language and then come back to us and let's have a conversation in Hebrew. Baruch
Yep.
haba, bon amshich.
Ishtabak Shamo.
Amen.
Yeah,
Alhamdulillah.
man.
Allahu Akbar.
Alhamdulillah. Yeah. Fantastic, Rabbi. I think I will stop over here because it's
All
just,
right.
I know it's too much for you to ask so many questions,
La
but it's a
ilaha
good
illallah
startup.
wa Musa wa Rasulullah.
It's a good to talk, nice to talk, fantastic all the
Nice
time.
to talk to
So
you.
you,
There is
yeah,
no
you
other
have a
God but the God of Israel, and Moses is his prophet. Yes, sir.
yes. So yeah, let us meet again by next week, and you have a fantastic, wonderful week. Shavua Tov
You too.
and
Shavuot
Lila Tov to you.
God's blessings be upon you.
Shalom. God bless. Hmm?